This meeting being recorded.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to ALS 1000. Today we're on the third day of our final individual presentations, and today we'll be going, by Zoom. We have the presentations by Zoom today. Best wishes to all the students that will be making their presentations. I look forward to hearing, about the hard work that you've put into this presentation and the outcome of the learning from it. We have Israel to start us off with the Zoom presentations. Please go ahead, Israel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Israel Grant, and my topic for my presentation will be covering around the labeling theory in African Americans. So in my research paper, I basically talk about the aspects of the labeling theory and how it affects African American culture in different aspects. So what I want to do today is present my findings on my research paper and also present some solutions in which we could provide more positive labeling for African Americans while also lessening negative labeling. But well, first things first, what is the labeling theory? As I mentioned before, I'm a criminal justice student, so I have a more of a different aspect to when learning about the labeling theory. In sociology, the labeling theory is used to describe deviance. Like, oh, this is what deviant people do. We believe that deviance comes because society has placed a label onto a person. In criminology, we use the labeling theory to describe crime, to describe the criminal line. We believe in criminology, criminologists believe that when society puts a label on somebody that is deviant, it's going to make them become a criminal. So with that, so more generally, the labeling theory is when you assign a label to a group, to an individual or group into a society, and this has many consequences because during different aspects from the group. If you label a group, it can lead to stereotypes, bias, stigma, discrimination, exclusion, and prejudice. On the individual, it affects them a lot more because it changes their behavior. Because when I mentioned before, it's going to cause them to be more deviant. It will endorse a criminal mind. They will feel less self-esteem because they feel like their label is negatively harming them. And another important thing in sociology, there's something called a master status that's basically your entire identity. So the label will become your entire identity, and you will conform into that label and do whatever that label will tell you to do. So where do we see labeling in African American cultures? Well, in the first part, we see like racial labels like blacks, Negroes, and colors have a mental representations of African Americans of having lower socioeconomic status because of the words itself, because how the word is perceived, it makes people think like, oh, they don't really see high of African Americans. They usually think of people from the ghetto. In education, institutions will label African Americans as special needs because they wanted to uphold segregation while actually disobeying the law. After the Brown versus the Board of Education, which banned segregation of schools, they tried to use special needs and special education to keep African Americans down so that institutions wouldn't have to teach African Americans. And in music, rap and hip hop are often labeled as criminal, deaf, and ghetto, and deviant. And more broadly, in single mother households, the mothers are usually labeled as bad because they are blamed for the absence of the father figure, the children's misbehavior, or any economic issues. They are seen as inefficient, and they mostly get most of the blame for that. So how does it hurt African Americans individually? Well, one, it decreases their mental health and hurts their self-esteem. They start to question about their identity. They will start conforming into harmful stereotypes, and the stereotypes will create the norm for African Americans. And because of this, if an African American is not conforming to the stereotypes, they will be seen as not black, which is kind of like a self-hating thing in the African American community. If you don't conform into the stereotypes, you will kind of, in a sense, you will feel like you lose your blackness. And plus, there will also be lower academic achievement. Being labeled as special needs will patronize African Americans, as teachers and staffs don't see much in them and don't expect much. And their GPA won't be as high as other students. And the labeling will misrepresent African Americans. So what can we do about that? There are many ways to stop labeling upon African Americans. One of the main important ones out of the list over here, I say, is awareness, because we don't know what we say might hurt someone. Because we all need to be mindful of what we say around other groups of people. We need to show them respect, and we need to show them positivity. Instead of labeling them as bad, label them as something good. Like, African Americans are good students. They deserve to be. They are not criminal. They are good citizens. Those are labels that can help African Americans to achieve better. And yes, and also, if you don't understand, and if anything, try to be involved with the African American culture. By being involved in their culture, you will understand more about African Americans, and it can help destroy any biases you may have. So I want to relate this to our class, because I remember we were talking about intersectionality and how, like, there's not just one identity. There's just not just one identity that somebody has. We are made up of multiple identities that is all connected to each other. I also wanted to make this point that when you disconnect an identity to yourself, it's going to take a huge toll of how you see or how you perceive yourself. Yes, multiple identities are good, but there's also your personal identity is also just as important as your other identities, as without it, you will lose a piece of yourself. And and what did I learn? I learned that labeling is used in many different ways to discriminate against African Americans. I also learned how labeling continues to enforce stereotypes and prejudice among African Americans. To prevent labeling from affecting more African Americans, we need to spread more positive labels about them and speak up against people who negatively label them. And with that, I'm done with my presentation.
You have 2 minutes.
Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns? If not, I'll talk about my own experience.
What got you intrigued into this topic?
Oh, well, that's good. I guess from personal experience, because when I was younger, sorry about that. In personal experience, because when I was younger, I wasn't really that much of a cool kid or expected to be like what other students of my color were like. So I was always seen as like other kids will call me, oh, like you acting like a white kid, and that usually got me upset because I don't act in the way how other students of my color acted, and I feel like that's holding a sign of racism because you're expecting me to act in a you're expecting me to act in the way how other people perceive the race, but it's like I'm black. It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what I do or what I am. I'm still black. You can't take that identity away from me. Um, anything else? Um,
All right, you have 10 seconds. You can just round up.
um, all in all, just be mindful of who you label. Labeling is a very big thing that affects people's identities and self-esteem. So yeah, just be mindful of what you say around other people.
Thank you very much, Israel. Let's go to the next person.
This meeting.
Hold on, how do I? Oh, never mind. All right. All right. So for my presentation, I picked the topic racism in sports impacts and change. So to start off, I want to start off with some data and trends. Some key statistics going into this project that I had to do was, according to data, it was reported that athletes received 132 reports in the 2023-24 season. The highlight number received by the Anti-Discrimination and Inclusion Charity in a single season. So that's one of the key stats, all right? Another important stat to notice is the most influential athletes throughout the history of American sports have all been Black. An example could be LeBron James, Tiger Woods, Serena Williams. So you know these names are like high up there. So there's big impact that they do, and pretty much African Americans account for 41% of the rosters in 5 major American sports. Athletes in both the NFL and the NBA. The New York Times published an article informing the public that the NFL is composed of 70% of African American players. So noticing that there's 70% of African American players that in the NFL, that pretty much sums up like that's pretty much the whole NFL and 30% of other ethnicities. So similarly, in 2020, at a crucial point in the ongoing Black Lives Matter movement, popular online sports forum in Interbasket analyzed that NBA statistics to find that just over 81% of its players were Black. So this pretty much is saying that the NBA and the NFL are pretty much more it's pretty much African Americans playing into the in the league. So some impacts of racism that I've figured was on athletes, it affects their mental health and higher rates of anxiety and depression because of the racism. They're linked to racism. And then the next impact is career progression, fewer sponsorships and endorsements of color for athletes of color. On society, racism reinforces stereotypes and divides us. You know, we want to move into a society where racism is like not mentioned or not like active, you know, because we want peace and equality. Inequality and access to resources like training and education. So this could mean like for people in younger like lower areas of it, like bad income, they don't have access to like equipment due to their skin color or any other stuff. So on to the next slide. An example of racism that I have is this footballer / soccer player named Vinicius Jr. Vinicius Jr. is a Brazilian footballer playing for Real Madrid, one of the most prestige teams in Europe or the face of soccer. And at his time, still going on, he has faced multiple incidents of racism during his career in Spain's La Liga. And I don't know about you guys, but Spain is a country where racism is very common. The most prominent cases occurred during matches where he was targeted with racial slurs and chants from fans. notably in stadiums like Medestala. These incidents have sparked international outrage and highlighted the systemic issues of racism in European football. Despite La Liga formally reporting several cases, most have no most have not led to prosecution due to insufficient evidence, leading to criticisms about the effectiveness of the league's response. So in this picture right here on the bottom left, so like I said, he plays for Real Madrid. In Madrid, there's two teams, Real Madrid and Atletico de Madrid. This right here, this image on the bottom left is from the opposing team, Real Atletico de Madrid, right? I don't know if you could read it, but it says Madrid odia a Real. So it's pretty much saying Madrid hates Real Madrid, you know, because it's two teams in one city. And I didn't get a close up, but right here is a dummy that's hanging, right, with the jersey of Vinicius Jr. And this was really a big problem that was going on because, you know, racism, he was getting attacked with racism. So UEFA did like this video to like and like to spread awareness
Dizemos não ao racismo.
where they pretty much
Nine
said no to
for-
racism in their own language.
Nem til racismo. Nem tem racismo. No to racism. No al racismo.
Yeah, so that's one of the videos. And so another example of racism is in the Euro 2020 final between England and Italy. It was pretty much overshadowed at the end because although England didn't win, a torrent of racist abuse was directed to England players Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, and Bukayo Saka after England's defeat in a penalty shootout, where the three players missed very important penalties and they were subjected to racial slurs and hateful comments on social media. This sparked an outrage among the fans, players, and public figures who condemned them on the attacks and called for stronger action against online racism. England's Football Association and players, including the team captain Harry Kane, issued statements supporting the targeted players and urging authorities to take action against perpetrators. The incident highlighted systemic issues of racism in football and society, reinforcing the call for stricter regulations and accountability in combating hate speech online. So I wanted to highlight this because these three players are young, you know, and they were stepping up on a big stage for their country. And the worst part about it is that although they lost, you know, you would expect your fan base to support you, get your back, and all of this, but instead they received racial abuse from their own fan base, which in my mind is that just shows you who people really are. So how do I connect this with the courses teams? Anti-blackness, you know, historical exclusion of Afro Latinx athletes in sports leagues, labeling such as stereotypes, natural athleticism versus intelligence in sports narratives. I put a picture of Floyd Mayweather, for example, because many people don't know about him. He's pretty much one of the, well, a lot of people know about him, but people think he's dumb, but he's just rich because of his boxing ability, but in reality, he's a smart businessman. He's made multiple. He has a lot of money in Vegas, and that's pretty much one of the examples I wanted to use of labeling because, you know, like I said, natural athleticism versus intelligence. That's just one of the examples of labeling. And from my personal reflection, what I've learned is racism in sports is a microism of systemic racism, and it takes courage for the athletes to confront injustice. Highlights the power of activism, although they are famous and they have money. Everyone is not the same, which is why it takes courage to speak up. And many athletes might fear on speaking on heavy topics like this because they're afraid that, oh, their contract could get like like higher ends could have effect on them and tell them, oh, you're fired, or they take money from them, or like it affects them negatively if they don't speak up on topics like this. And an example could be Colin Kaepernick. You know, he wanted to stand up for he pretty much kneeled to speak up for his rights, and look at the backlash he received and everything he's faced and what happened to him. And another reflection that I've learned is the media plays a huge role when talking about these topics as well. There's many sources that speak positively about topics like this, and there's other sources that speak negatively about topics like this as well. So what are solutions that we could do about this? We could have awareness campaigns, partnering with organizations like Black Lives Matter to educate fans and athletes. We could also have policy changes, enforcing anti-racism policies in leagues with clear consequences for violations. Representation, promote the diversity in leadership roles within sports organizations. So the next slide I have is an awareness campaign by Nike, where pretty much famous athletes such as LeBron, as you see here, are talking.
Is this the land history promised? Here, within these lines. On this concrete court. This patch of turf. Here, you're defined by your actions. Not your looks or beliefs. Quality should have no boundaries. Bonds we find here should run past these lines.
It's been a long time coming.
Opportunity should not discriminate. Ball should bounce the same for everyone. Worth should outshine color. We can be equal to
Equals everywhere.
So yeah, that's one of the commercials that Nike put out. And closing, some key takeaways that I got from this project is racism in sports is a reflection of broader systemic issues, and addressing these issues requires collective effort from athletes and organizations and fans. So here I have a video. I hope we have enough time of Kobe.
And understanding that
Talking about
racism is a thing that's been a part of our culture for a while.
Five-time champion Kobe Bryant.
The incident with Raheem Sterling yesterday is very much on our minds.
Manchester City's Raheem Sterling.
Even though now, we've come such a long way, but there's still so much to be done.
Freedom always demands sacrifice.
Italian Mario Balotelli.
I think education is always the most important thing.
We've highlighted, unfortunately, the perpetrator we believe to be
Speaking up and taking a stand, a significant stand.
Liverpool.
Oh,
Mohamed Salah.
If it's gonna happen and one more time, I'm gonna leave the pitch.
First ballot Hall of Famer to be Kobe Bryant spoke with CNN on one of the biggest issues facing world soccer, racism. Per Home Office, hate crimes rose 47% for the 2018 night, from 131 matches to 193 matches. The examples are countless and depressingly endless.
Chance and people switching up.
so this is my references, and yeah, that's pretty much it from my presentation.
All right, thank you so much. Next, please. So while we're waiting for the next presenter, I've put the list of names in the chat. So if you've not presented, you can look in the chat and you'll be next to go. The other thing, make sure that you upload your slides to me by 11:30 p.m. tonight, Tuesday, December the 10th. Not tomorrow, not the day of the final, tonight. If you make your presentation today, your slides must be uploaded tonight because I'm grading in batches. If I don't receive your slides by 11:30 p.m. tonight, I reserve the right to reduce points. The other thing, there are extra credits on the assignment page. Please take advantage of them. I'm still accepting week 14 and week 15 reflections. I'm also accepting the 4 or 5 extra credits that I've posted up there on the assignment page. Remember, they're all due tonight, Tuesday, December 10th by 11:30 p.m. Next presenter, please.
Sorry. Hello, my name is Max Stickle, and today I'll be talking about the role of diversity in driving social change in communities. Introduction. Diversity is a foundational element for vibrant and progressive communities. Communities today are characterized by various cultural, ethnic, and social economic backgrounds. The focus of my presentation today would be on how diversity enhances decision-making, fosters social unity, and drives transformation and social change. And in this little image down below in the bottom left, it shows a whole bunch of different ethnic groups and social interworking, all being connected to show one true like form or like one positivity to express itself. And today I'll have a little video about what diversity is.
Wouldn't it be boring if we were all the same? How would we learn anything from each other if we had the same likes, skills, and interests? That's where diversity comes in. Luckily for us, we are all unique and different. This is called diversity. It can be things we can see like our height, the color of our skin, or our gender. But it can also mean things on the inside too, like our religious beliefs, the languages we speak, or just our own unique feelings and interests. By being open-minded and celebrating our differences, we can grow in ways impossible on our own. Everybody in your community has their own unique story, experiences, and culture. Let's celebrate diversity and learn and grow together.
I chose this video because I really liked how it elaborated on community and how it meant us to be interconnected, even though everyone's very different and we go through very different things on a daily basis. We are all somehow very connected. And so diversity in decision making. An impact of diversity, it helps broaden perspectives and enhance problem solving. An example of this would be environmental issues can benefit from solutions rooted in cultural transitions and varied life experience. A key insight I took from my readings doing my research was that Truckett argues that diversity reduces reliance on narrow viewpoints and encourages innovative approaches to complex problems. Improve solutions through diversity. Comprehensive understanding would be the diversity viewpoints illuminate gaps in traditional approaches such as in healthcare access. Real world impact. Diversity decision-making improves the fairness and effectiveness of policies. And critical thinking. Diverse groups challenge assumptions, driving innovate and thoughtful solutions. Social cohesiveness. A definition of social cohesiveness is social cohesiveness refers to creating a sense of belonging and equality among all members. Which is a key role of diversity, which this helps fosters inclusivity, ensuring marginalized voices are heard, which helps in everyone's voice being heard and helps with debates, conversations on a daily basis, is going around your life, like at your work situation. It's a key role in your day-to-day life, I'd say. And research insights about social cohesiveness, and according to Frontiers in Psychology, inclusive communities empower members to participate actively in shared decision-making, which this says it pretty much makes more people eager to participate and share their opinions on specific view matters or specific viewpoints. Promoting peace through understanding. Breaking down stereotypes. Interaction across cultures build empathy and reduces prejudice. Some key benefits could be diverse communities, cultivate mutual respect and collaboration. An example would be schools and workplaces that emphasize cultural exchange report fewer instances of conflict and greater teamwork. Some challenges of diversity. Some obstacles to overcome would be miscommunication, cultural misunderstandings, and implicit basis can hinder progress. Solutions would be respectful dialogue and cultural competence training, improved collaboration. And another example would be workshops on a cultural sensitivity equipment individual to navigate and celebrate differences. It which helps explain why people should try to talk to each other more and elaborate on like their misunderstandings, because we could each learn from each other and we should value those experiences rather than treat them as negative experiences. Addressing conflicts as growth opportunities, turning conflicts into strength, open up positive discussions around differing values can deepen understandings. A result of this would be communities grow stronger by addressing disagreements constructively. An example of this would be mediation sessions in multicultural neighborhoods, often resulting in lasting resolutions and stronger community ties. Diversity as a driver of social change. Some key roles are diverse communities innovate by addressing social problems through multiple perspectives. An example would be climate change strategies by groups like Women's Earth Alliance, showing how diversity enhances problem solving. A quote from Disco, diverse groups bring different skills and perspectives to the table, enhancing the creative problem solving process. Some policy implications: inclusive policies, leaders who prioritize diversity create more equitable policies. Impact on trust, such as policies fostering stronger relationships between citizens and their leaders. And a broader implications could include encourages active participation in the democratic process, driving national and global progress. These changes could change our country as a whole in the long run, just over everyone just slowly deciding to change their ways. And some key takeaways, what I learned through this project, while working on this project, I learned about how many different ways diversity could positively affect a community. From like the community I live in, like it's you foster empathy, creativity, innovation, and social cohesiveness. And I could take away from this because when I go back home, I go to work and I work with some sorry, I work with some Latin Americans who traveled illegally across the border, and hearing their stories, how they got through the troubles they go through, and then what they know and the knowledge they bring with them it's beneficial, in my opinion. And so through these means, I'll be able to impact my community in positive ways through the knowledge I learned through these interactions with different people. And in conclusion, diversity is a powerful driver of innovation, equality, and social cohesion. While challenges exist, they are outweighed by the opportunities diversity creates for progress. Finally, embracing diversity strengthens communities and ensures a brighter and more inclusive future. And here are my citations.
You have 1.5 more minutes.
Does anyone have any questions? I could elaborate more on what I learned through this project. Another takeaway I could say is more of like towards my friends. I'm proud of the friend groups I've made and the diversity which is included in them. I enjoy that process. I like learning about new people and learning about their ways of life. It's fascinating towards me. So I enjoyed more focusing in on this type of topic so I could get a better understanding of myself and the people around me.
All right. You can yield your next 40 seconds to someone else if you wish.
May I?
Mhm. All right.
Do you have any questions, Professor?
What made you decide on this topic? Why was this topic important to you?
Well, this topic, at first, it wasn't very important to me, But like the more I dug into it, the more like I felt like attached to it, because like I see this on a daily situation every day. Like the people I meet, I have like a whole bunch of friends back home, like their situation, their understandings. I want to constantly like mentally understand what they're going through and also what I'm going through. So like I wanted to like dive deep more into this type of topic between communities and diversity and sort of like connect them in a way, if that makes sense.
All right. Thank you so much. Very good.
Of course.
Next person, please.
That's it.
While waiting for the next person to come up, remember your slides will be due by 11:30 p.m. tonight, Tuesday, December the 10th, and you're to post your slides into the assignment folder final presentation. All right, please don't forget by 11:30 p.m. tonight. Also, all the extra credits, including week 14 and 15 reflection, will be due tonight by 11:30 p.m. So take advantage of the extra credits. There's ample opportunities for you to earn additional points because we'll be going by the rubric for the final presentation. All right. Please, the next person, you're welcome to start your presentation.
So I did my topic on African American and Latinx history in the United States. To be more specific, I went into activist leaders and whatnot in the civil rights movement. So starting with Rosa Parks, which is one of the more well-known ones, she's known for refusing to give up her seat on the bus, leading to her becoming a civil rights leader. Her doing this caused a boycott of buses in Montgomery, Alabama. And during the boycott, she was fired from her job and traveled to raise more awareness and funds for this movement. She decided to make this stand because of the anger she had over the lynching of a 14-year-old and the failure to bring the killers to justice, which I will go more into depth over this kid, and his name was Emmett Till. She led the Montgomery NAACP. She was awarded Presidential Medal of Freedom and the Congressional Gold Medal. She established the Rosa Parks and Raymond Parks Institute for Self-Development, and she did that later after her husband died. Next one, also a well-known one, was Martin Luther King Jr. He's most known for his I Have a Dream speech. He won a Nobel Peace Prize in 1964 for bringing the idea of nonviolent resistance to gain equal rights. Martin participated in the Montgomery bus boycott that was formed by Rosa. He was arrested and imprisoned as the boycott leader for the bus boycotts. Some of the protests he led ended up being televised and showed footage of the Birmingham police spraying pressurized water and sending police dogs at the peaceful protesters. The protest led the resignation of the Birmingham police chief and caused the city to desegregate public places. He also, while he was arrested in the Birmingham, by the Birmingham police, he wrote a letter while he was in the jail. Martin led many civil rights movements, protests, and marches that helped shape the history of African Americans and Latinx in the United States. Harry T. and Harriet Moore, they worked more together under the civil rights. There were a couple in the civil rights movement. The fights they won for the community resulted in them being killed by the Ku Klux Klan in their own home. By the time of their death, Florida had the highest number of Black registered voters, and Harry mainly fought for equal rights in Florida by investigating lynches, challenging barriers for voter registration, and fighting for equal pay for Black teachers in public schools. Because of their influence in the movements, they were fired from their teaching jobs. And later, shortly after this, Harry involved himself in the Groveland case, where 4 Black men were accused and convicted by an all-white jury of raping a white woman. And Harry led a campaign to overturn the wrongful convictions. Cesar Chavez, he was a Latino and farm labor leader. He spent 10 years with the Community Service Organization, which was one of the most prominent Latino civil rights groups. He led campaigns against racial and economic discrimination, and he was the first person to set boycotts for major labor management disputes, and the boycotts led to the Agricultural Labor Relations Act of 1975. Dolores Huerta, she was an influential labor activist and a leader of the Chicano civil rights movement. She began her activist career in 1955, where she co-founded the community service organization, which is how she met Cesar Chavez, and leading to voter registration drives and fighting for economic improvements for Hispanics. She met Chavez through this organization and later founded the National Farm Workers Association. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, these acts were key roles in turning points for the history of African Americans and Latinx because it helped gain them more basic rights and equality in the United States. Obviously, it didn't get all of those rights and equality, but it helped with most. So these two acts changed legislation. They helped outlaw discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. They also banned discrimination in public accommodations, education, employment, and prohibited race-based restrictions on voting. They also brought many of the laws and practices of the Jim Crow era to an end. And I forgot to mention, we're done with the activists and we're going more into civil rights movements that were the most helpful in these situations. And what was taken down during the civil rights movement. So school integration. During Brown versus Board of Education, it was one of the biggest landmarks in civil rights cases and helped fuel the civil rights movement. It ended an era of separate but equal treatment of African Americans, and the civil rights helped create equal education access for many African Americans who were attending integrated schools. And then back to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, it removed literacy tests and other devices like the grandfather clause that were used to discriminate others, mainly those of color, from voting. It prevented states from being able to change voter requirements and gerrymandering districts. And later, the poll tax was banned in 1966. It caused a raise from 35% to 65% of Black registered voters in the South. And then back to the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act barred discrimination on race, sex, color, religion, and national origins in the workplace. National Organization for Women was created while this act was in place. It secured equal access to restaurants, transportation, and other public facilities, and it enabled African Americans and women and other minorities to break down barriers within the workplace. So some of the popular movements listed here, there's Brown versus Board of Education, the Montgomery bus boycott, Freedom Riders, Birmingham Campaign, Little Rock 9, Fair Housing Act, Freedom Summer, Loving versus Virginia, and the lynching of Emmett Till. So in slides after this, I'm going to go more into depth about some of the movements that I wasn't aware of, because in high school, we didn't get taught much of this. We got taught the basics. We learned about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. So I wanted to go into more depth to help myself learn more about these situations. And I basically already talked about in these slides the Brown versus Board of Education, the Montgomery bus boycott, and the Birmingham campaign. So I'm going to be going more into depth of the other ones. So starting with the Freedom Riders. And this was a group of civil rights activists who rode buses through the segregated American South. They protested for the lack of enforcement Supreme Court ruling that prohibited segregated public transportation. They faced arrest, beatings, and violence in white segregated areas while doing these boycotts. The Little Rock 9. So these were 9 African American students who desegregated Little Rock Central High School. This situation became a major step in the fight for civil rights in education, and it gained a worldwide attention and tested Brown versus Topeka ruling. The next one is the Fair Housing Act. It was a civil rights law that protects people from discrimination in housing based on race, color, national origin, sex, religion, disability, and familial status. The act protected people whether they were renting, buying, getting a mortgage, housing assistance, and other housing-related activities. And this protected them whether the processes were public or private. And the next one is Freedom Summer. This was a civil rights movement aimed to register Black voters in Mississippi and end voter intimidation. This movement was organized by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the Congress of Racial Inequality. This project included voter registration, freedom schools, literacy and civics classes, and promoting the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And then back to what I was talking about with Rosa Parks, this is what fueled her to want to fight for the rights because of the injustice that was in this case. So the lynching of Emmett Till. Emmett Till was a 14-year-old boy who was kidnapped, beaten, shot, and had a metal fan tied to his neck with barbed wire and thrown into the Tallahatchie River. Because of this situation, it brought nationwide attention to the racial violence and injustice in Mississippi. Because of this situation, it caused other young kids of color to be frightened that this would happen to them, and causing them to join the civil rights movement and help prevent this from happening to them. And how this relates to course themes: anti-Blackness, exclusion against those of color from basic rights such as education and voting. And I also brought up how it related to my other presentation I did with my group, which was the Forgotten Workers of America and Racial Capitalism and the War on the Working Class. And I explained why this relates because the civil rights movement had an impact on helping people of color gain rights within the workplace, whether it was sex, religion, race, and whatnot. And then my final slide was my works cited.
Very good. Any questions for Ella? All right, thank you so much. So we have two more presenters and we're sort of running out of time. So we have to get going with, loading up the slides and getting started with the presentations. Please, we have two more presenters, I believe. Anne, are you here?
I'm here.
Okay, please, let's go ahead. Or maybe one more. I believe Anne may be the last person.
Hi everyone, my name is An, and my presentation today is going to be on self-esteem in adolescence in correlation to race. So I just want to go over a couple of things we're going to cover. The first, we want to define what self-esteem is, what it looks like in comparison in teenagers, and what it looks like in adults. We're going to go into the correlation of race to self-esteem and the cultures and ethnicities associated with those races, and how, like, the reasons for why they affect self-esteem. So first off, what is self-esteem? Weber State Counseling Center University describes self-esteem as: self-esteem is your overall opinion of yourself and your beliefs about your abilities and limitations. Self-esteem is shaped by your thoughts, relationships, and experiences, including those related to culture, religion, and societal status. So your self-esteem basically is how well established your sense of self is, how confident you are in your abilities and also how confident you are in your morals and your beliefs and how established you are as a person. The funny thing about self-esteem is that your self-esteem in part can rely on other people or how you think other people view you. If you think people view you as a very shy or timid person, you yourself kind of lose that self-esteem and you start to believe yourself as a shy and timid person. Same as if you think people see you as very confident. This is how self-esteem differs in adults and children. Because teenagers are more impressionable, they're more affected by how they think their peers view them. So young adults and teenagers are more impressionable and susceptible to outside influences and pressure from their peers due to social dynamics. This is because they're more eager to fit in with their peers, and they may adopt certain traits that are disingenuous to their real selves, which can lead to lower self-esteem. This is because subconsciously, when they're trying to mirror their peers and their friends, they're basically changing their beliefs or trying to hide parts of themselves. Even if subconsciously they're doing it, it sort of presents in their self-esteem. So how is it measured? This presentation is all based off a study called Adolescent Self-Esteem, Differences by Race and Ethnicity, Gender, and Age by Gerald Bachman. And what they did is they provided a survey to 8th, 10th, and 12th graders, and then compared this to older self-esteem surveys to measure the difference. So the groups surveyed and the ones we're going to talk about were Black African Americans, whites, Hispanics, and then Asian and Asian Americans. So this is a graph from this study. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but if you look on the left, we can see that African American males and females had the highest reports of self-esteem, while the lowest were Asian American males and females. And then Hispanics and whites had very similar reports of self-esteem, but we're going to go into some differences of that too. You also see, if you look to the right of the African American males, the African American females had a lower self-esteem report, and that's because all of the females have a slightly lower report of self-esteem, which we're also going to get into. So here are some topics we're going to go over. As I said before, Black students had the highest reports of self-esteem. White and Latino students had an equal amount, with the white being slightly higher. Asian students had the lowest amount, and female students had the lowest in comparison to their male counterparts. So Black and African American teens. In schools where Black students are the minority, they're more likely to face race-based discrimination from majority peers. Even if you attend a primarily white school or primarily white institution that has been that way for a very long time, there are a lot of factors inscribed into that institution that works against whatever the minority is. It's institutional anti-Blackness. So they usually, Black and African American teens will face a lot of discrimination in those places. I may be wondering, if they face a lot of discrimination, wouldn't that lead to their lower self-esteem? Well, because Black people have historically long history with racial bias in educational settings, they have this response to defend themselves, basically. If you think about the rise of like the Black Power movement in 2020 to 2021, that encouraged a lot of defending yourself, empowering Black voices, speaking up against injustices. So Black students and African Americans within the US have a very long history of sort of rising to any discrimination to defend or protect themselves. As such, this results in a higher perceived amount of confidence and self-esteem compared to their peers. White students, the self-esteem of white students was often measured as average, average being it had the most similar and consistent amount of self-esteem over the decades. It wasn't really based on factors like discrimination or financial situations, because there was no need to really defend themselves from discrimination since most of the institutions were primarily white. And so any measures of self-esteem was based on other factors like gender. Now, Hispanic students have a similar level of self-esteem measurement to white students. I think it's important to note that the African American, the Hispanic, and the Asian students all face discrimination, but the Black students are more focused on basically defending themselves. There's a higher, how do I say? They work more to defend themselves in those situations. So while Hispanic students are affected by them, there's other differences that are that factor into the level of self-esteem, and this is usually educational or financial differences. So Hispanic students are shown to have lower GPAs, have a lower chance of continuing into higher education, and also because if they have a first or second generation parent, they usually have no formal or higher level of education. If you look at this graph, this is from the 2021 US Census. We see that 38% of white students graduate from two-year institution compared to 33% of Hispanic students. And in a four-year institution, 65% of white students graduated compared to 52% of Hispanic students. You see there's about a 13% difference there. Some reasons for this are a lot of socioeconomic barriers, which I know we've been discussing over the course of the semester. A lot of these are financial barriers, access to education and housing. And some of these financial barriers will often carry over into not being able to afford school or things like that, which because they have a lower outlook of Hispanic students who plan ahead for college or future schools, it leads to that lower report of self-esteem. So now I want to talk about the Asian students. Asian and Asian American students had the lowest ranking in self-esteem compared to every other demographic. And this is due to a combination of discrimination, like we mentioned with the Hispanic students and the African American students, but also because of their ingrained cultural belief and practices. So you may have heard the stereotype of like all Asian students are really good at studying, or they're super smart, they're really good at math. That's not entirely true, but it is true that there's very high educational expectations in Asian countries like Japan, China, and South Korea. Basically, there's a very big highlight on education because to get a good job in Asian countries, you need to attend some form of higher education. And so they start very young with their children and put a lot of pressure on them to succeed. And of course, if an Asian American student has a first or second generation parent, these expectations carry over into the US. So because they start so young and they have such high goals for their children, there's a fear of disappointment, comparison between their peers, increased mental illness, stress, and anxiety placed on the student, which of course result in lower esteem scores because they have less time to figure out their identity or spend more time figuring out their morals or their beliefs if there's these pressures on them always to succeed. And finally, I want to talk about some gender differences that lead to lower self-esteem levels. Across all groups, the female adolescents scored lower than their male counterparts. And some factors that contribute to this are gender-based discrimination, societal expectations, and then also body image issues and body dysmorphia or media dysmorphia. So because we talked earlier that teenagers and kids are more impressionable, and this can have a bigger effect on their self-esteem, when young girls, for instance, are taking in all this information and all these ideas from the internet, like TikTok, the short form media, they even subconsciously are easily impressionable, so they absorb these outside differences of what they should look like, how they should act, what their purpose is. They also can face a lot of societal expectations, maybe from their family members or from their friends, again, from traditional expectations of how a woman should act or how they should be, how they expect them to be. So because, at a young age, these girls are being told more than their male counterparts how they should look, how they should be, they have less time to figure out their identity, figure out what morals and beliefs they actually believe and are important to them, which leads them to be less confident in themselves, which leads to lower reports of self-esteem. And although it's gotten better over the years, there's also other things such as gender-based discrimination, like in the workplace, with unequal pay and things of that nature. So this was my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. If you guys have any questions, I'd love to take them now. And if not, I can talk a little bit on my experience with this project.
Any questions? All right, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to round up.
Okay. So I actually really enjoyed this presentation. I think someone else said something similar where it wasn't that important to them when they began. But as I did more research, I found it really interesting how many factors, not just like, or how much your self-esteem can rely on how other people think of you. Even though we think of self-esteem as you yourself being confident with no other inspiration or outlooks, I thought it was interesting to see how easily it could be influenced. And so I ended up really enjoying this project.
All right, thank you so much. Very good. Thank you everyone for your final presentation that you've made today. Very impressive. Do not forget, you have until 11:30 p.m. tonight, Tuesday, December the 10th, to upload your final presentation slides under the assignment folder tab in the final presentation folder. We're going to continue on Thursday, December the 12th, which is the final exam day scheduled by Sonny Onionta for this section of ALS 1000. And you're welcome to join us in person, those of you who have made your presentations. Otherwise, I also have opportunities for extra credit. All will be due tonight. If you go under the assignment tab, you're going to see the extra credit opportunities. I'm also accepting week 14 and 15 reflection. So haul in as much points as possible because I'll be using the rubric for your final presentation grading. I'm grading in batches, so for those of you that just made your presentation, by tomorrow or by Thursday, you should have the grades for this presentation. All right, best wishes to everybody and all the best.